In the previous two readings, we read about working class high school chicas in non-prep track programs, and then we read about the process of dropping out of two Latino males. Now we're reading about first-gen students or Mexican origin first-gen students and their schooling experience. While the piece focuses on the relationships among the teachers, parents, and students and how they engage with one another, I also want you to think about the structure of schooling, that context within which these interactions are happening. I also want you to think about the power of perception and culture and how in a heterogeneous society, the ideal types of what we see, the ideal parent, the ideal student roles, the ideal teacher roles, play a role in these people's actions. We're looking at the interplay of structure, cultures, and agency. During this summer session, we talked about how the high school dropout rate for Hispanics has declined, or actually for everybody, but especially for Hispanics. We know that Hispanics have the lowest educational attainment level of the major racialized groups. And while their college enrollment has been increasing, has increased recently, they are more likely to begin their education at a community college and less likely to attend a four-year university than their counterparts. Now, Riegel and Crum noted that parental involvement was not critical to significantly increase Hispanic students' enrollment in college, but that was because there were other factors at play, like the importance of specific cultural capital, like knowing how to apply for college, and that having more visits with counselors in high school increased the odds of Hispanics going to four-year universities. Adults in schools can be important gatekeepers for access to opportunities and information. We see that here. The researchers for this piece talk about how parental involvement is actually key for student success. And there are elements of this piece that really make me quite irritated, frankly, because sociologists have been talking about uninvolved parents for decades. Remember, LaRue's work is just one example, or LaRue's, yeah, I want you to remember LaRue's work. Her work is just one example of where she demonstrates how there are class-based expectations about how homeschool relationships should exist. Schools want the type of activities and engagement and the kind of cultural capital that upper middle class professionals can perform, like, doing these kinds of things. And the researchers for this article make the argument that like these types of involvement are key protective factors. So Latino parents, though, are less likely to practice concerted cultivation, in part because a much lower percentage of them actually have college degrees. They are more likely to parent in ways that are more aligned to the accomplishment of natural growth and development. Now, don't think of these factors listed here as shortcomings of the parents. Think of them as products of the parents' social location and generational status in the United States. Latino parents care deeply for their children. They are more likely to see education as a vehicle for economic opportunities and socioeconomic mobility than nearly all other racial categories except for Asian parents. Latino parents try to prepare their children for the adult world, but the way that they do that is often not recognized, nor is it valued by our social institutions, especially schools, which want parents to be peer educators and to behave in very specific ways, right? In these ways. Okay. In Mexican culture, we are more likely, though, to see a cultural practice referred to as familismo. Familismo values interdependence, recognizing that we as a family all need each other. And given the scarce resources and the weak social safety nets in our society, strong family ties are the source of strength, resilience, and survival for Mexican families. As such, the commitment to the family's needs over an individual's wants or needs is part of familismo. Family is really a protective force for the individuals of the family who are often subjected to, or Mexican families specifically, who are often subjected to scapegoating, stereotyping, criminalization, etc. Mexican families tend to value discipline, good morals, good manners, and respect for elders. These Mexican families that are part of this study see these things as a foundation for educational success. Now, here's a brief overview of the methods for this study. The study used a purposive sample selection in a large Southwest city with a large Mexican immigrant population. All of the students, except one, attended a college preparation high school, and to get into this high school, there was a highly competitive application process. Students also received scholarships so that they could attend the school. And the one student who didn't go to the school was enrolled in a public IB program, which is also a college prep program. The participation in the study was completely voluntary. Most parents spoke mostly Spanish and were low income. And there were 11 participants in total. It's also worth noting that the researchers didn't actually speak Spanish. Okay. Now let's turn to the findings. The parents' own experiences in their country of origin shaped their attitudes towards their children. They saw the channels of mobility, the opportunities for education differently in the United States than those that they had actually experienced in Mexico. They wanted their children to have more opportunities, so they made the effort to come to the States. They also supported their children's dreams and aspirations, noting that they did what they did and try to do what they could in order to support their children's goals. Now, they practiced the accomplishment of natural growth and development with some caveats, right? They also instilled discipline in their children, expecting their children to have a routine when they got home. To these parents, granting children too much freedom was detrimental to their success. The discipline and strictness is necessary for success from the parents' perspective. The communication of high expectations was coupled with consejos, which were stories about their own experiences that illustrated the points that the parents were making. As an aside, I want you to think about the purpose of that storytelling. It informs the children that they come from strong, determined people, right? These narratives are much like the historical narratives that students are taught in history classes. Those history courses that students are subjected to are designed in part to inspire, to help students see that overcoming adversity and rising to challenges is part of our national identity. When we don't have formal courses that tell us that, the stories of our elders that tell us that can help fill that void. Now, the parents in this study did not actually initiate contact with the schools or the principals, though all the parents responded to the educators when the educators took the initiative to reach out to the parents. The teachers talked to the parents about how smart their children were and the potential that their children had. The teachers encouraged the child, helped them with their applications, and getting their scholarship fees paid. The parents followed the teacher's lead and took their advice and the help of the school adults. Now, the school adults provided critical information, resources, and support so that these children could go to these highly selective schools, right? The educator's intervention was absolutely critical. Now, the parents performed at least part of the parenting schema that Annette LaRue called the accomplishment of natural growth and development. The teachers, though, still played a vital role in these students' abilities to enter into the college prep programs. The school adults had cultural capital that they themselves extended to the families. The consejos of the parents provided powerful first-person accounts, narratives, if you will, about the limitations that existed in their country of origin, and seeing the United States school system as an opening of the channels of mobility. Foster and Kurpius acknowledged that the parents' involvement the parental involvement of these parents was largely invisible to the schools that these students attended. The other important element here is that these children then were tracked into college prep curriculum that made four-year universities and aspirations for selective higher education an outcome for every student whose parents participated in the study. The other reality that is not addressed here, though, is that by definition, highly selective schools are exclusionary, limiting who gets access to such opportunities. Many of the parents in the study would not have been aware of such opportunities if it wasn't for the educators making choices about who is capable and who is worthy of such opportunities. And the other thing that I want you just to kind of think about is how in the cultural scripts of schools, every child in a classroom is supposed to be exposed to the same curriculum and is supposed to be treated equally and by the teacher. And the teacher's just supposed to be evaluating the student performance. In these children's stories, right, from this study, what we actually see is educators violating the norm of the teacher's script, where you are universal and treating all children equally. These educators are being particularistic. They are identifying children and saying, that kid is exceptional. And so I'm going to spend my time, my extra energy, and my extra resources so that these children can have a different type of educational opportunity, right? And that's exceptional treatment, yet not universalistic treatment. And yet that treatment, and then going to the parents and setting up the conversation with the parent in such a way that the parent is receptive to the suggestion, opened these opportunities for these students. And that door needed to be open. And when that door was open, the children and their parents walked through. Right. So here is that interplay of culture, agency, but also very importantly, structure. Right, because not everybody was afforded this opportunity.